this is the thing that gets you fired or that gets you promoted. Yo, I suck in this. And that's okay. Because then someone can actually help you with it. Well, if you've read my stuff, then you know that NPS is an absolute garbage metric. It doesn't help at all. It really.
Want to create products that attract and retain customers while cutting marketing costs and boosting loyalty? Then you need to know about product-led growth. I had the pleasure of interviewing Lea Tharin, whose article about product-led growth has been read by over 40,000 people with experience at Smallpdf and her current position as an interim CPGO at Gutfoto. Leah is an advisor, teacher, and a podcast host with deep insights into this topic. We discussed the benefits and tactics of product-led growth, including the powerful use of interactive demos, which I'm now incorporating into my current product. You want to stay till the end because she revealed the number one thing that gets product managers promoted or fired. But first, let's start with the most important question. What is product-led growth?
So product-led growth, historically, the way that we understand it is that it is a distribution framework. So like, how do I sell products into a market that have already found product market fit? So products that are good enough in a big enough market. The product-led part, originally we said that, like the product is selling itself. So like the self-serve motion where you have freemiums, trials, that kind of stuff. And that was the original kind of definition. It got a little bit confused now, I think, over the last couple of years, but it is actually a concept around B2B. So businesses selling to businesses for two reasons. One of the reasons why this is so relevant there is that we have other methods of distribution otherwise. So we could also choose to sell with a salesperson. And this is usually where you start to get the tension, right? So like, should we sell over product like growth or should we sell over a salesperson? Because sometimes in B2B, the answer is not that straightforward. These motions also work a little bit different because businesses have usually much more complex demands. The person who buys it is not always the user, and so forth and so forth. So you have some kind of, you have choice, right? Like in your distribution model. In the B2C world, so Spotify, Netflix, that kind of stuff. So any software that is being sold as a subscription service, you almost have to do product-led growth because the unit economics do not work out otherwise. And this is why people usually just say like, oh, product-led growth? Yeah, that's a fad, like we've been doing this for 10, 15 years. Yeah, we know, right? Like we know, but the B2C has done this. But the problem is all of these concepts from B2C, they need to be adopted to B2B because they just work different in the business world. That's basically what product-led growth is in a very oversimplified manner.
And what do you think are the main benefits for product-led growth in B2B in particular?
So there's a couple of them, and it depends on like where you sell as well. So let me just expand on this really quickly. So you have specifically different markets that you can sell into. And let's just say we have an enterprise market. So enterprise would be very few clients with a lot of money individually. Then we have the mid-market. So we have a couple more of them with less individual money to spend on. And then we have the small businesses where it's almost a B2C market in the sense of, you have individuals, agencies, that kind of stuff, like that are buying your software. So what is the advantage of doing product-led growth for each of these individually? On the SMB segment, so like the small to medium business, it might be that you have to do it because otherwise you just cannot make money with, just again, because of unit economics, right? So take a Figma, Canva, some other services where you can just do graphics, that kind of stuff. You almost have to be able to show it in a product-led way so the smaller companies can buy and try it. For the bigger companies, it also has some benefits in the sense that, let's say you're selling into all segments. So like you have a big company, like you have an enterprise segment and you also have a smaller company segment. These can help each other in the sense that the smaller companies who are using the free version of your product, right? So like, let's say you have two different versions, right? So like, hey, you can try it out a little bit, but if you want to buy it, then you need to talk to a salesperson if you're an enterprise and so forth. Typically, we have 20 to 100 more free users in these smaller companies than we have in the enterprise segment. Now, what does that mean? This means that I have a lot more data to play around when I'm trying to figure out which interface is better to make the product look better and easier to navigate. This is a very common problem that we have when we talk to enterprise segments. We just do not have a lot of clients, right? So like when I tell you, you go to LinkedIn and then you have the usual bullshit where they just tell you like, you just make an experiment between A and B and so forth. And a lot of these companies are looking at this and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I have like 20 clients and I cannot afford to just experiment on half of those. That just does not work. So having a product-led growth motion where you have something in the free market, which allows you to have much more people, allows you to experiment more, and you have much more to verify, and you learn a lot from these segments as well. Having said that, this is a very old view of like looking into, like enterprise, small businesses and medium business. The reality is that if you're in it for the long run, so let's say you want to build an enterprise, or like your company should be here in another 5 years, then you have to think about this problem a little bit different. So what we say is, you can also grab enterprise value before it becomes an enterprise value. So what that means is a percentage of your smaller customers will expand over the years, year over year over year, into a bigger client. And if you have a product that scales with them, then you will keep this revenue, right? So a good example is HubSpot. You can go as a really small company, you can onboard, you can try it out, super, super easy. And if you have a 200 people sales team, you can still use it very, very well, right? Like it scales with you. So it is very clever because it also it goes a little bit over these sections, and product-led growth products tend to be easy to use and just easier to understand and onboard as well. And that is simply to do with the fact that if you have a free version in the market with so many users, you will get hit in the face very fast if you make a mistake in there. There's no salesperson that tells you like, like this is a problem. It's just like 50 people are just stop using the product because you changed something in the interface that you should not have changed. And because you have so much data, you can actually see it. That's it in a nutshell.
What do we have beside product-led growth?
You have sales-led growth, where you have salespeople going out and selling, as we already said. And then the product-led growth part, where we talk about having a freemium trial and so forth. The reality, though, is that most companies actually need to do some kind of blended version, or are doing or trying to do some kind of version where we call this product-led sales. So, for instance, let's say you have a company and you start to sell over salespeople. You start to notice, it's going really well. You have 10 people that are selling your product. And then, like one guy is just saying like, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we had a free version of our product that is quite limited, but so at least, like we can show it to the customers. So they're doing this. And then you kind of say like, okay, like without them having the ability to kind of pay for it and just use it completely, we can still leave it on the website and so forth. Now they have a part of a free product in some kind of way. Does that make them product-led growth? Kind of, not really. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. It really doesn't, because you're always doing like what kind of suits you. And what I mean is that a lot of these companies are living a little bit in between. And what we try to do from the product side is we try to take the data that we have from our users, so the product usage data. How does Mahmoud use the product? And then we try to derive from this a kind of a prediction into the future. So for instance, Mahmoud is doing action A, B, C, and D, and so forth in the product. Therefore, we know that if someone does this, they are more likely to be interested in our product. Therefore, it might be more worth it if someone personally calls Mahmoud to close the contract. So, for instance, let's say you have a page somewhere that only someone reads that is really, really interested in doing business with you. And if I can mark this in the database and I can attach it to your name, then I know something about you just based on your behavior that is very valuable for me. So anything that signals buyer intent, you use the product more, you start to invite your friends and so forth. Super, super valuable. And in the end, a product-led signal that you send to the salespeople. So this is why we call this that's why I'm talking a lot about product-led sales, because it's usually get blended motion of two.
What are examples of tactics or strategies that product managers can use to have product-led growth?
So if you are starting new, if that's your question, right? So let's say you're completely new to the entire topic and you try to figure out, where can I start with this? One of the problems that a lot of people have is that they confuse themselves by just trying to do everything. They try to do a freemium, they try to do a trial, they try to do an interactive demo, and so forth. When we talk about what can I start with if I'm in a sales-led company, I'm personally just a small founder. I'm only selling through myself, and I do not know where to start. Or I'm in a bigger company where we just have salespeople. We never really provided any tools for them and so forth. A really, really good tool is usually an interactive demo. Now, what is an interactive demo? an interactive demo is something that you usually set up with with a provider. There's a couple of them now on the web that are doing this. They are specialized in this. And what this does is it's an interactive version of your product without being the full product. For instance, let's say you use Zendesk, which is a support tool. And Zendesk is offering an interactive demo on their website where you can kind of click through the product. You also see how it looks like from different perspectives. How does this feel for the support agent? How does this feel for the admin? How does this feel for the customer who has a problem? How does this feel for a salesperson that is using this to sell something? And these interactive demos are not the full product, but they give you a very good insight on like how this feels. Behind these interactive demos is usually also tracking. So let's say you want to get started. You could build a kind of a version of this, of your product that looks like an interactive demo, and also track the data that is going through there. So for instance, you could say that, hey, I'm going to tell everyone in sales about everyone who moved through the entire demo, who reached the end. Not just used it, but like reached the entire end, like, or spend more than 10 minutes into it. Like, something similar, something really, really simple. The way that this feels for the salespeople in the end is that when they are picking up a call or they can see who it is that they are interacting with, and it says somewhere has seen the entire interactive demo and spent 20 minutes in it, or like used it like 5-6 times. This is information that is very useful. Do I know how they're going to use this information? No, I don't. I don't care. Sales will know how they're going to use this, right? So this is one way. So this is how you make your product step by step a little bit more accessible to the market. And the next step then would be to have a full trial, something that is time limited or usage limited of your full product. That is already quite a big step for a lot of companies, right? And then the next level would be to have a freemium. And a freemium does not always make sense, but it can make quite often sense, which is a free version of the product that exists forever, but is in some kind of way usage limited. So for Smallpdf, this would mean, for instance, that you cannot process more than 1 or 2 documents per day, but you can use the entire tooling that they have. As soon as you want to use it more, you're also going to have to sign up for a trial and so forth. Now, why would you do this in the first place? Why would I give someone something for free? You might ask yourself, or you might not, but like, why should I give anyone something for free? It's not just to convert them into buyers. It's not just to convince someone, oh, like we're so good and so forth. A lot of people, the majority actually, even in B2B, will tell you that they're not interested in buying your product. But if I have a free version of it, then I can still use the people who are using it for free as advocates in the market because they are generating word of mouth. If you do not allow someone to use your product for free, it's impossible for them to recommend it because you're not allowing them to use it. So there's this kind of interplay that product managers need to kind of start to understand, and anyone that builds a product, that there is value in this. It's hard to measure whether you are going to talk about my product and so forth, but this is what product-led growth is, right? So like there's this word of mouth and these things that are going around. So that's on the side of like exposing more of your product to the market through some kind of free value in the first place. The second interesting thing on this is purely on the data side. So let's say you want to understand what people are doing in your product. So let's say you have some kind of product where you can measure what they do, whether it's with the trial or whether it's your customers or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Let's take a very simple example. Let's say you are manufacturing a car, just as an example for the software, right? So what you produce is a car. What we usually try to figure out is like, what is the aha moment for the customer where they objectively understand what you are offering as a product? And what I mean with that is, when have they reached an experience where we as a client can say, okay, they have tried it out now. They are enough informed to make a buying decision or a decision to explore your product further, or to say, this is actually not what I was looking for. So in the example of the car, this could mean, let's say we sell cars for delivery drivers. Is the aha moment when they have finished their first delivery? Is the aha moment when they leave the car, like they close the door and they return the key? I don't know, whatever it is. But that moment is unified, right? So like we need to kind of figure out, okay, so like when is this correct moment? And we will mark the people in our database. So we can say like, hey, like out of 100 people that we bring in and show the car, only 20 of them are doing something very specific, like they drive with the car, they do a full delivery and so forth. And then you can take learnings from this. So you can say that, hey, you know what we are optimizing is not necessarily how many people are trying the car, but how fast they can try out the car. So for instance, let's say Mahmoud is signaling some interest to me, like, hey, I would like to try out your car. I'm a delivery driver. I'm super interested. And if I know from data that in average, it takes 20 minutes from you signaling your interest, me giving you the key, you get into the car, you do the delivery, you return it. And I think that I can do this faster. Right? Like I can push down the time from you trying my car. Then you are really driving value, because we know the faster we get people to value, the more likely it is that they also buy from us afterwards. And that's a very interesting thing that has absolutely or little to do with monetization and the price that you're charging afterwards. This is simply optimizing the free version of your product. So it's not just like whether you have something for free to show, it's also, is it representative of what the customer gets when they're using the full product? So a good example in this regard as well is that if you have a car and I'm locking everything down and I'm just saying like, well, in order to experience it, you need to have the full version. It's not really a free version, right? Like there's this funny example that I usually use in my cohorts where we talk about, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, like a specialty restaurant, like they produce really good food. It's a traditional restaurant from China. What good is it if they give you cheap food for free to try that has nothing to do with their full menu? Nothing. So what you can do is you can reduce the portion sizes and you can say like, hey, here's a little bit that you can try. And there it kind of makes sense, right? Like in the restaurant, it makes a lot of sense why you would not give the cheap food, but you would give the good food, but in smaller quantities. That's the kind of idea behind this.
Let me say it with my own words. So if I am new product managers, I want to start with the product-led growth. First thing is interactive demo. I think that's a brilliant idea. I never read it before. Then is freemium, then full trial. And you mentioned that when the reason why we give this product for free is we have to build advocates within the organization. And you mentioned that we need to have a aha moment, a really fast aha moment as well.
So
correct?
What you want to figure out is you want to figure out what kind of moment of usage is highly correlated with someone buying a product afterwards. And for Slack, for instance, like if we use Slack, then the typical thing would be like if you send more than 2,000 messages as a team in 30 days, there's an extremely high likelihood that you're going to go into a paid subscription afterwards. And finding signals like these is not that easy, but you need to start somewhere, right? Like, and then you can kind of try to figure out like, hey, like we know now that out of 100 people that reach the aha moment, 80 are buying the product, for instance, or whatever it is. There's 40, 30, whatever it is. This gives you a lot of power because you start to see revenue before it actually lands in your banking account. So it gives you more time before you can actually do something about it. Yeah, so like in this progression that you said, you mixed up the order a little bit, but like in the progression that you said is absolutely correctly. So it's first an interactive demo. You don't need to do this always, of course, but like especially for products that are scared of offering a trial, this is an easier lift, and then you do the trial, and then a freemium sometimes does not make a lot of sense for B2B companies, but yeah, that's a good concept to approach it that way. Yeah.
Do you have any example where you created this small aha moment for your clients?
So specifically at Smallpdf, what we looked at when you talk about the aha moment. So for Smallpdf, the tool itself or the website, the service, what it offers is you can modify or change in any way PDFs. So everything that has to do with PDFs, signing them, cutting them, putting them together, throwing them out of the window, I don't know, whatever. Like actually for 1st of April, we made a product that just deleted your PDF. It's quite funny, but yeah, we just called it delete PDF. Everything that you uploaded, we just deleted it. The typical aha moment for Smallpdf back in the day was, did someone modify and download a file? So the moment where they downloaded a modified file that they have uploaded, that would be the aha moment. This is highly indicative of like an understanding, okay, they understand what this product is about. Because if you did something with it, then you really understand what the product does. There's not just aha moments, we also have habit moments or setup moments. A setup moment is, for instance, when you are ready to go. So for being ready to go could mean that they have a document that they want to process and they are on the actual page where you can start the process. And then you can start to reduce the time it takes to get from setup to aha moment, for instance. Also highly indicative of whether they have a good time with the product, whether they're successful, and then whether they're going to buy afterwards as well.
Product-led growth, especially the last 10 years, has become very trendy. When do I know if product-led growth is the right thing for me or sales-led growth?
That's a good question, and it's a difficult one because it's in some cases it's really clear because it usually depends on like where you sell. The smaller the segment in terms of the amount of money that you can charge per individual customer, the more likely it is that you need to have some kind of product-led motion in there. And that's quite obvious. That is quite obvious. What's not so obvious is that when you create a new category, so like, or let's say you are doing something that is extremely innovative. So let's just take Tesla 15 years ago, when nobody was driving Teslas, right? So like it was not known in the world that you can drive electric cars. Sure, I mean, the concept is clear of an electric car, but it was still kind of a new thing. And if you had to get it, then like, how do I charge it? And like, how do I do this? And how do I do that, right? Like it was not exactly clear how you would integrate this into your life. A product-led growth approach for software that is in this particular state, like you're so innovative that it is so new that nobody even knows that they have this particular problem, right? So like the demand does not know that it wants it. Product-led growth has really problems in there because if I cannot explain to you simply through a website what my product does and you get it 100%, then you cannot explain it to another friend. And that's why we usually talk about for really early stage startups, even if they choose afterwards to do product-led growth afterwards, they're super, super innovative, you know, like they feel like they reinvented the wheel again and so forth. You almost have to start with sales. It doesn't mean that you're doing just sales-led growth in any way, but like you have to start with sales just so you understand and are also closer to the market before you really do and dive into this product-led growth motion where you try to compete with someone else. So I don't know, like whatever software you're going to build, like, but if you try to compete with another software, then product-led growth might be an option for you if the market is big enough and, you know, people know it and you just like, you want to acquire others that are already using a different kind of solution. So they know what the problem is and they just, you know, like exchange a gasoline car with a new gasoline car. That's what I mean. Nowadays, these things have changed, of course, for Tesla, for instance, right? Because everybody knows what Tesla is. Because of Elon, because of like how many cars are driving around and so forth. There's a big adoption for EVs now. And now this has kind of changed. So like if your software is in an environment like this where people know about you and the brand is very known, then product-led growth might make actually quite a lot of sense because now you can also drive it with word of mouth. Hey, you know, did you hear? Like, yeah, she has this particular software or like she has this particular problem and she solved it this way and that way. So it is important that your product is also easy to recommend and easy to explain to others. Otherwise, you need to have sales.
So if the product is not on the cutting, bleeding edge and it's easy to recommend, easy to explain, product-led growth might be a good path for you.
If you're also selling it to, and if it's software that is over SaaS, which is mostly the case, right? So like something subscription business, something that you can consume in the browser, then it can make sense, yeah, of course. And it also, like, look, I mean, it's exactly what I said before. It makes your product easier to use, and it also helps to give you feedback. One common problem that a lot of product-led growth businesses have that are relatively new is that they think they don't have to talk to the customers because they have a lot of data. But that's a problem because you still should talk to your customers. It does not absolve you just because you do not have salespeople that you should not sell your product. You have to, like, you know, your first customer is always the hardest one. And then the next one, and then the next one, all right? So, yeah.
You mentioned market. I'm wondering how much is market or cultural. So for example, in the Middle East, if we're buying something over $1,000, we lack a sales representative to talk to us.
Highly relevant. So like geographically, we have a lot of different behaviors. So in certain cultures, it's very, very acceptable. And we're also expected that you can haggle your stuff around, right? So like that everything is going to get haggled. It's not the case here, for instance, in Switzerland and in most of the European countries, at least in the Western European countries, as far as I'm aware. On the other side, it's not just that, right? Like, so it's not just price. It's also like how you're being sold. So, for instance, in Latin, so Latin America, if you try to sell anything that does not have watertight security and so forth, like everything is just different in there. Like they do not accept digital signatures. They want everything to be done with a notary and so forth. You might have a great product in one market and it just completely tanks in another one. We experienced this in a very painful way with our stuff at Smallpdf, at least for one solution for like e-signature, exactly in the way that I said. They just do not accept it there. And when I was in Sao Paulo, it was also very interesting because the food apps that they use are very, very secure compared to what we have here in Switzerland, right? So like there's a lot of PIN codes and the food is like secured. Like it's much more secure than the stuff that we do. Like my pizza guy can easily just eat the pizza or like eat half of it and just put it back in. It just does not happen. In Sao Paulo, you have to really unwrap the food afterwards, right? So like you need to make sure that everything is there. They need to confirm it on the app and so forth. And it's just different, right? Like there's different needs for different cultures, and for software a little bit less, I would say. But I think for physical goods or also other services, it can be quite crazy. Yeah, the difference can be very crazy.
You mentioned the mistake that product managers or entrepreneurs do with product-led growth is they stop talking to customers, which is a big mistake, especially the early customers. Is there any other challenges or mistakes that you see people do again and again?
I'm trying to think about this. So, like, let's say you love going into a fitness center, and you have perfect visibility over who is doing what in the gym, how many repetitions, which machines they use, how often they come, and you have perfect overview, right? You see exactly what's happening with every individual person. You will still struggle in making your fitness center much better because the data can tell you everything that people do, but not why. So understanding the why is extremely difficult because you do not know whether someone is going in there for their fitness. Is it for their health? Is it because they want to date? Is it because their partner is going? Is it because they don't want to be home, and for instance, and so forth? You do not see this in usage data. And I think I'm just repeating now the other point that I also said, but like, this is why it's important to talk to people. So you need to learn how to connect these two. And the way that I think about this usually is that you talk to people because you want to know what could be important to people. And then you use the usage data, so everything that you know from data, to confirm whether this is also what most of the people want. So for instance, let's say you go to 10 people in this gym and you ask them, hey, what's important to you? Like, what could we do better? And then they say like, well, I would love it if you had a allow dog policy, right? So like, I want to bring my dog into the fitness gym. And then you think like, hey, like 3 out of 10 said this. This sounds like a great idea. Let's test it. So you bring in 3 dogs and you have this perfect tracking and so forth. And then you can see afterwards whether now, well, those 3 are maybe happy, but whether people are leaving or like whether people are starting to exercise now less. This is an exercise of like, you can improve your experience for some people and then declare, like, negate it for others, but you will only see this now then in the quantitative data. And this leads to my other point of like what people are doing wrong oftentimes. They do not have a holistic view over what the net benefit of something is. And this is very hard to do as well. Like, if I'm building something, what does this do? What does it mean if I build a specific feature? How many more customers will I get? How many more customers will go away because I have this? How does this affect the salesperson's process? How does it affect marketing? How does it affect customer success? Specifically, if you're in a bigger company, like what does it mean for the engineers to maintain the code, for instance? These are questions that you have to ask yourself. And as a product manager, you're the only person who can have a chance of like understanding all of these questions before you put them together. And you kind of have to do this for every idea that you have. This does not mean that you need to go completely overboard, but you should understand how your ideas compare against each other in some kind of way. Idea number 1, extremely risky, is going to help us with sales. Idea number 2, dealing with tech debt, like this never ending question of like, should we clean up the code, or is it more worth it to build a new feature? I don't know. You need to know as a product manager, right? Like, and you can only do this if you really do the legwork, if you start to understand like how do other people's stuff work. And that's the most common mistake that they have, is that they do not know how to talk about dollars and make ideas comparable. And that's what I would say.
I love the gym analogy. It's so complicated to run a gym. I never thought about it this way. I've been in a situation where I wanted to answer those 50 questions, for example, and I get stuck by analysis by paralysis. And I was in another situation where I tried stuff, let's do testing, and I tested a few ideas and it completely obliterated the entire domain. So which approach you would recommend?
This is about creating a business case without testing something first, right? So like before you even do an experiment, you should do it in business case. The most basic way of understanding what I do, whether it makes sense or not, is to write it down on a Miro board, FigJam, whatever you want to do, in the sense of like, I have a core hypothesis. This is the idea that I have. Okay, fair enough. And then you think about, okay, what kind of impact does this have on our acquisition? So the amount of people that are coming into the product. Is it relevant for more people or less people or not? And then you have some kind of idea. You think like, yeah, like this actually could be relevant, right? So let's take an example. Let's say you do, you make your product look better, more modern. So you think through this and you think like, hey, does this matter for the new people that are coming now into the product? Well, it depends how shit your current product looks. So it's about the difference, right? And then, yeah, like this will actually make a big difference for new customers that are coming in. And then you go, okay, this is a big impact, right? So like check mark, right? Okay, so like, okay, big check mark, whatever. We're coming back to this afterwards. The second thing is, does this have some kind of impact on the existing customers that we have? So you're an existing customer, we're going to change the interface. Okay, whatever, they're already using our product. They're not going to stay longer for this. Maybe they even churn more a little bit. Maybe it's a minus, I don't know. But maybe, like even if the interface is, they got used to it. So it's not that big of an effect. So now we already know that we have an assumption, at least, that for acquisition, this is a bigger topic. So now what do you do with this? You kind of look at this and you're thinking like, this is the thing that takes me 3 days to build. I don't have to spend too much more time on this to kind of evaluate this. But if I put a full team on this for like 3 to 6 months, then you should probably spend some more time on it. So what do you do with this now? You go in and you think about, okay, can I actually split this up now even more? So what does this do to acquisition? Let's say you're building a new feature that has a very specific keyword attached to it on SEO, like search engine optimization, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, like we're adding a new machine to our fitness center, like the proverbial software that we're building. Are there keywords out there that we need from marketing that they can now farm? I can ask them about this, right? So like I can ask, hey, can you check how big this keyword is? And does this make sense to bid money there? Like, can we get something, right? Like I don't need to do it myself. I could just say like, hey, what do you think? Like, is this a good thing or not? And then I can go on Google Trends, right? Like I can try to think about it a little bit through. Like, is this a demand in the market or not? Because if people are not searching for this, then there's no demand. Okay, so we have this. So we can go through this step by step where we think like, okay, like maybe this keyword and so forth. How many people in the funnel that we have? So out of 100 people, how many of them are maybe interested in what I'm adding now to this particular thing, right? Like this new machine, this new feature that I'm going to add. Maybe you can ask 10 of them. Maybe you can do a survey where you try to kind of figure out whether someone even mentioned something like this and so forth, right? Like whatever it is, whatever your poison is, however you want to validate this, you take this and then you try to take it apart with a friend in the company. You try to completely destroy it. You have to challenge your own stuff until you are sure, you know what, this is actually a good idea, because nobody was able to just like, it's not about finding arguments for your stuff. It's about surfacing where am I unsure. I have a lot of business cases that are going into the millions where I'm just like, I don't know. I really do not know. I have no idea. How can I validate this, right? So like it's about learning how to find good data sources for your own stuff. And the cool thing is once you start doing this, you start to notice a couple of a couple of commonalities that you can keep using in every other business case. So for instance, let's say you have 100 people who are unsubscribing from your product, or 10 or 20 or whatever it is. If you know why they actually unsubscribed, you start to get a lot of valuable data. So for instance, if you have 10 people, and out of these 10 people that have churned, so they have uninstalled the product, they do not want to use it anymore, 9 of them are not using it anymore because it is involuntary churn, meaning their business went out of style, right? Like they do not make any more money, then there's nothing you can do about this. If it is because your product is crap, like your server was not working and so forth, and it's just unstable and so forth, then you know what you can work on. So we take this and we know, of all the churn that we have, I'm going to just say a silly number, 50% of these people have a problem with our technical infrastructure. So if you're building something new now, we go through the same questions again. Does it change something on acquisition? No, probably not. Does it change something for the existing customers? Yeah, we think so. You know what? 50% of the people that left have a problem with this. Let's assume we can keep 20, 30% of those with a good solution that we now have, like our server is not completely failing anymore and so forth, and we're addressing this. You suddenly have a number of customers that you're now retaining that you would have lost otherwise. This is how you can create numbers. And boom, now you have the second case that you can compare to the first case. This is how you have to kind of do this, right? Like it's kind of it is really like a muscle that you have to exercise. You start to get cases and you do it like this, but there's no tool that makes this easy for you. You have to just write it down. You have to think about, hey, can I actually figure this out better? What does this mean? How many people does it affect? Because business cases are always about how many people does this affect? And usually you find the answer for existing customers in your churn survey. So you need to understand, why do people leave me? And then the second step is to kind of figure out who is actually leaving me, because this is another thing. Not everybody that is using your product is worth using your product, right? Like we should only have people that are really also meant to be our customers,
Firing your client, that's very
It
hard.
is very hard, but you can think about it in that way, right? So like, let's say you're building luggages for business travelers. And you have now musicians that are using this stuff, and they say like, hey, well, like my instrument does not fit in there. If you start to listen to these people, you've got to make the luggage bigger. Now it doesn't fit into the planes anymore for which you have originally built them. And this is the kind of thing where you're just like, focus yourself on a very specific group and do not listen to the others. And that is difficult sometimes. So it's not just about firing a specific client. You don't have to fire them, but like you just don't listen to them. We accept money, but we do not care that much when they churn.
I'm thinking, how can we measure if we have product-led growth? The common advice on the internet is just measure NPS. What do you think about this advice?
Well, if you've read my stuff, then you know that NPS is an absolute garbage metric. It doesn't help at all. It really, no, it
Can agree
doesn't
more.
help. So there's a lot of research why NPS does not predict churn in any way. Like it does not help at all. It really doesn't. But I understand why people want to do it, right? Like they want to kind of know whether people love your product or not. And I kind of get it. Okay, okay, whatever. But the thing is, if you want to predict churn, if that was your question, right? So like if I want to know why people are actually churning, you need to understand much more basic signals. The first one is, why do people go from you? So I call this like the both ends of the dog. And that's the tail end, right? Like that's the thing where the crap is coming out. So why do people go? We need to kind of get this under control. Like we need to understand why they go. But then the other end is like the first part, right? So like the mouth. Why did people come? If you start to ask and understand why people actually got into your product, and you start to notice that a lot of them came because, hey, a friend recommended it and so forth, then you kind of know, you start to understand, okay, we started to acquire people because others are talking about it. right? So we have this word of mouth, this kind of network effect that is starting to go around, and this helps you quite a lot. Now in B2B, it's not always that simple because most of what I'm talking about is really basic, more like on the smaller kind of segment stuff. But as a principle, it really works that way in understanding like the snout, the mouth of the dog, and then the tail of the dog at the end as well. And that's your kind of magic. In the end, you always try to optimize your product and not someone else's product. And that's why the NPS itself is like, it's a hypothetical question. You should never ask customers your hypothetical questions to determine whether they're happy. It helps me much more if I know whether they're using the product. And someone that does not use your product is not happy with it. It's that simple. Or they don't need it.
I did read your article, and I share your confusion about people use NPS, especially in B2B. But what do you think is a better metric to measure if they want to check if this is useful for them or not?
When we talk about having good metrics, and it depends on like what you want to do with these particular metrics, then you can have metrics that predict earlier than what you would know before your bank account starts to hurt. So, like when my revenue goes down, it's usually already too late, right? Like there's some problem that I'm not aware of and then it goes down. So there are sometimes leading metrics. And a very common one is product usage, right? So like if I start to see that in average, so I don't know, let's use a stupid example again, like from Smallpdf. If the amount of documents that are being processed is going down, then you will soon see also that the subscription prices and the revenue is starting to go down. But before that, because if people do not process documents, then the subscriptions also will kind of go down. So it's an overly simplified example, but that's definitely one of the things. So you want to have some kind of leading metrics. The other thing is that like whatever you are measuring when it comes to happiness and ease of use and so forth, you want to have it comparable underneath each other. The NPS has this problem that it is a statement over your overall product. So like, what did you think about my entire thing? Hey, would you recommend Tesla to your friend and so forth? But it does not tell you whether they hate something individually about your product. Everyone who loves a specific product also has some things that they don't like about it. And what I usually do is I try to measure always after the fact when they are successful with a task. I try to measure it through a CES, like the customer effort score, like how easy was it for you to use this particular tool? The easiness is usually a very good predictor whether someone is also happy with it. And then you have a CES score for feature number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so forth. And those you can actually compare with each other. So it's not about, is a score of 80 of the NPS good versus 60 or 40? I don't care because I don't know how you measure it. And I don't know how Apple is measuring it. I don't know how Spotify is measuring it. No, but like this fest that they have around each other when they talk about, we have an NPS of this, we have an NPS of that. It always matters who you ask. If you ask only people who have been using your product for a long time, you get a very high score. If you ask people who are just onboarding onto a horizontal product that is extremely complicated to use, right? So like, like something where you have to learn every nook and cranny and so forth, you get a very low score. So what should I do with this? I don't know. I cannot do anything with it, right? Like it's useless. But if I have different features in my car and I know that some features are scoring a 4.2 in average and some features are scoring a 3.2, then I know that feature 2 is in some kind of way worse than number 1, but I know it could be possible to bring it up to level 1 if it had the same kind of quality attached to it or the same kind of product fit to the customers. And that's the thing. You want to create metrics that you can internally compare to each other at least in some kind of way. So that's why I always go for the CS or the CSAT score. So you're examining a behavior that has happened. So like how easy was this for you?
Big members of our communities are junior product managers. And initially I thought that one of the most important skills that a product manager is technical understanding. Again, I was a software developer at first, but I turned out to be very wrong. In your opinion, what is the the most important skill for product
Managing up,
managers?
down, and sideways. You are a facilitator in the end, right? Like you need to bring people on the, like, you're going to play mommy and daddy, and that's just what it is. Like you bring everyone together. There's a lot of drama, a lot of bullshit happening all the time. So you need to kind of find a common language between people. And that language is usually for engineers, the technical language. For the C-level, it is money. And sideways, whatever silo that someone works in, right? So like if it's marketing, then it's more about acquisition. If it's more about customer success and support, then it's more about the problem side of things, like, hey, how does this affect retention and so forth? So, you need to kind of start to understand, like, this is what I'm telling to people always, that as a product manager, you should be truly the person in your company that understands your product the best. There's no one else that understands it better. Whether you're doing this over the qualitative data or the quantitative and so forth, it's completely up to you. But nobody should know it better. That doesn't mean that you need to understand the code, because your product, how it is being used by customers and users, is ultimately the truth in the end. And you as a team, like you're a facilitator for the team, so you're trying to enabling others to bring the entire product that you're managing forward. And I think that's a different. That is quite. That is maybe a definition that has changed over the years. Like that we are now much more facilitators rather than the people who have the best ideas. So it's not expected that you have the best business cases, but it is expected that you have a business case that we can fight around and have ideas around. Right? So it's about collaboration and enabling things so we can move forward and get alignment with each other.
No, absolutely. And to double down, it's one of the most asked questions in our community is how to manage up. Because it's really hard to teach. I don't know how to teach it.
Yeah, I have an article on this one where I just made an entire framework around this. I usually do not do this. I'm just, I always call like managing up is always like, this is the thing that gets you fired or that gets you promoted. And I think people,
wow.
no, but like people always get confused. Every PM that I know has too much to do. Everyone, like 95% of them are always complaining how much they have too much to do. And it's just a wrong statement. Even I as a C-level, obviously I have too much to do. There's no one in the company that has too little to do. That's not the point. Your job is to kind of figure out like which things can I let fall by the wayside. No one is getting fired for doing specific things not so well over others. It matters what you do, right? And it's not always the stuff that also costs you a lot of effort. That's the thing. So if you want to do one thing as a product manager, then you need to be reliable. You need to be reliable. Making money is nice. All of this is nice. Like being the most technical person is also nice. But you need to be reliable. If you promise something to your manager or the manager of that manager and you deliver it, or you are always proactive if you're missing a deadline, and we know that we miss deadlines all the time, and you're extremely valuable. You're extremely valuable because I can trust you, right? Like I can depend on you. Whether you have the skill, whether you're the best designer, whether you're doing this and that, this is all besides the point. The thing that gets you fired usually, and I'm saying it in this way, really, like the thing that gets you fired is if you get confused about what's important and what not. I don't care so much if someone really messes up, but I do care a lot if they mess it up and then they try to hide it because they're afraid of my judgment. And I'm not mad because they messed up. I'm mad because they tried to hide it, because then we have built some kind of level of distrust. And this level of distrust always haunts you. It always haunts you. Like one of the worst mistakes is that you pretend that you know when you do not know. That always gets you into hot water. And this got me into hot water in half of my career until I understood it finally that, Leah, you don't need to know everything. Stop pretending that you know everything. It's just so exhausting and it's so annoying and it makes you unreliable. And this was the thing that also like kept me from going up in my career, because I just always pretended to, I know everything. Sure. Right? It's just not good.
Oh God, I don't know what to say after that. I feel called out.
No, but like, look, we all have a self-value,
yeah.
right? Like we spend a lot of time on Instagram. We're trying to present ourselves. We always try to look the best and so forth. But fundamentally, we all have the same kind of needs in life. We want to be respected. We want to be loved. We do not want to be left alone. And we just want to be also respected, whatever it is. The thing is, the most senior people that I know in that kind of sense, and people that are also happy with their jobs, they don't care for like standing in front of people and just say like, hey, I don't know. I have no idea how this works. Can we figure it out together? And it's fine. Even if it's something that, look, it's specifically as a product manager, this is what's so hard because, what should a product manager know? Everything. You should know how to do business cases. You should know how to do data. You should know how to do qualitative interviews. You should know how to manage up. You should know how to drive business outcomes. You should be a product owner. You should know how to do a backlog. You should know how to manage engineers. You should know how to manage a designer. You should know how to do user interviews and so forth. So there's so much stuff. It's impossible to know everything. So what we need to learn is to say like, I'm a product manager. I'm a good product manager, but I never learned how to do X. Can you show me? Even though I should know? And that's what gets you ahead. Like it's a sour apple that you have to bite into. But like the things that always got me ahead is like when I started to just admit like, hey, you know what? I actually do not know what I'm doing here. I do not know. And that's okay. I don't need to. But like, how can I get ahead, right? So like, and then you start to find your allies that are really experts. Because the problem is if you pretend that you know, then nobody will help you because they think that, well, okay, either she knows or she's a bullshitter. And those are the things, like you live so much more carefree if you just say like, yo, I suck in this. And that's okay. Because then someone can actually help you with it.
Oh God, I'm so grateful for this last piece of advice. But I want to be very respectful of your time. I know we're out. I'm gonna include the comment for in the comment
Yeah.
section your YouTube videos, your Substack, your Twitter, and course on Maven. But do you want to guide our members anywhere
No, I think
else?
that's it. So I mostly write for more senior people, but I'm always trying to be as actionable as
Yeah.
possible. And, I've fallen in love with product management over, I don't know when it was, 15 years ago. I'm still here. So if you're frustrated, if you hate your job at the moment, it sometimes happens, but there's also parts about it and also companies that really try to do the right thing and are really, really good places to work. And I'm saying this because I know that a lot of PMs are right now very frustrated and hopeless because, they just have a shit job and the environment is just not that good and so forth. And, but you don't, there's good things. And I'm trying to be one of these executives that also does it better for others. I really try. Not for the good of my heart, just because I think it's much cooler to work in an environment that you like.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahmoud.